But let's start with Golden State and Memphis. And before we get into some of the nitty-gritty details of this game, I wanted to take a minute to talk about Jordan Poole, because we've talked about him on the show before as a bridge, right? A bridge from two eras. You've got, it's so important when you're trying to have sustained success in the NBA to draft well and to make moves on the margins that keep your team filled with talent, and not just talent, but new energy and new ambition, right? And when you're talking about, like, for instance, a San Antonio Spurs team, it's not that Tim Duncan didn't care as he got older, or that Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker weren't, as invested as they were when they were younger. But as their physical decline was taking place, they needed an influx of talent in order to bridge the gap long enough for the San Antonio management to try to bring in a new crop of stars, right? That's what Kawhi Leonard represented to them. And Kawhi Leonard obviously kept that ship floating, even to a greater extent than I think even Spurs management expected. But that's kind of what Jordan Poole has turned into for the Warriors, right? You've got this existing core group of stars in Steph, Klay, and Draymond, and then you've got this future of stars. Moses Moody looks like a very good, 3-and-D type of wing. Jonathan Kuminga looks like Jeff Green right now, which, again, the question becomes, does he become Jeff Green or Tracy McGrady from there? Because Jeff Green obviously didn't have the consistent ceiling to really be as valuable in the league as we all thought he would be. But Jonathan Kuminga's got all this flash of, like, freaky athletic 6'9" swingman who can guard multiple positions and, create shots off the bounce and pressure the rim in a way that a lot of guys through Golden State haven't been able to over the years. And then you have James Wiseman, who we don't know what the deal is with him. Obviously, he missed this entire season, but they've got this new crop of stars and they've got this old crop of stars. But you can't toe both of those lines. It's a dangerous game to play. You get caught in the middle and it can be a problem. Well, Jordan Poole is so good already that he represents a bridge between those two eras. But what's even more interesting to me is the specific way that he adds so much juice to this Warriors offense. If you look at the Warriors offense and what made it so great in the 2010s, it was a combination of a bunch of different things. It was Steph Curry and his ability to drag defenders away from the three-point line. We talk a lot about guys taking defensive attention, but the vast majority of defensive attention that you saw in previous years in NBA history was rim attention, right? LeBron driving to the basket and everybody collapsing and him spraying out to shooters. That's what you're used to seeing. Well, Steph did like an inverse version of that where he was pulling guys away from the rim. And so suddenly Golden State was running these 4-on-3s on the back end and getting layups and dunks nonstop because no one was under the rim, right? What helped make that work was guys like Klay Thompson, who was an excellent three-point shooter, but also a great movement three-point shooter, and he was great at attacking closeouts. And so he was great at capitalizing on the attention that Steph would pull away from the rim. And then Draymond Green, everyone knows what he does great offensively or defensively, but one of the biggest things that he's brought to this team over the years is his playmaking out of the short roll. So when guys send two bodies to Steph just hooks it over the top to Draymond, and he's barreling down the middle of the floor. And if guys come into him, he's great at making reads out of that. That's kind of been the traditional organism of Golden State Warriors basketball. And it's always been important to have guys around those three that are smart, guys that can make quick decisions in 4-on-3s. One thing they have never had, though, is like a true straight line drive threat. Steph is very good at weaponizing his shooting to get past people. And that does apply rim pressure to a certain extent. Same thing with Klay, whether it's pump fake and drive or just guys closing out recklessly because they're terrified and him rolling to the rim, or Draymond rolling to the rim simply because no one's guarding him. They get that kind of rim pressure. What they don't get is what you've seen from Ja Morant in this series, which is me staring you right in the face and me just going right around you because you can't keep me in front. They've never had that really athletic, like straight line drive threat. And you've seen how much that can damage a defense. This is a very good Golden State Warriors defense. They can't do anything with Ja Morant. They can't do anything with him because they cannot keep him in front. Having that dynamic is a totally different type of offensive warping that comes on that creates openings for other people. Jordan Poole is that guy for this offense. He is the guy that can stare you in the face and hit a quick move, and he's already past you. But he's not just past you because you were pressing up on his shot. He's not past you as you're kind of slowly meandering your way into the lane. No. He is flying by you like a blur, and it just causes everybody to collapse around him. And what's amazing is he's actually a great passer, which is unusual for a player that age, especially a player that is this polished as a scorer. A lot of guys that come out looking like this are more scoring focused. They don't pay as much attention to the flow of an offense and things along those lines. What makes it especially dangerous is he's doing these things with Steph and Klay on the floor with him. So when you've got Steph and Klay, and Andrew Wiggins, by the way, a lot of people have a misplaced representation of Andrew Wiggins because of his career in Minnesota. He's turned himself into a bona fide 3-and-D player, 40% three-point shooter on decent volume, obviously a great defensive player. But when you have Andrew Wiggins on the floor with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and you have a guy that can be a straight line driving threat the way that Jordan Poole does, it adds this whole other dynamic to the offense. You know, when Steph was in his absolute peak, every single screen and roll at the top of the key was a trap. Like every single time, no matter what. If you didn't trap Steph, you were going to get beat, right? So as a result, they were playing a ton of 4-on-3. Well, you're seeing a little bit less of that as Steph has gotten older. Having Jordan Poole be able to quickly compromise the defense with straight line drives is giving a lot more 4-on-3 opportunities, but with Steph actually involved in that action. It's been super, super interesting to see. And that's the dynamic that's going to make this team super interesting going forward. Because I think Jordan Poole is going to be an all-star one day. And so when you have a guy who right now is like at this moment an all-star level player, that's a massive influx of talent. You know, that's what is allowing this group to age gracefully. Klay Thompson had a big night tonight, but he hasn't really looked the same since his injuries. Draymond Green is still the same defensive monster that he's always been, but he's never been able to recreate the offensive pop that he had in 2016, right? So a lot of like trying to get back to the amount of talent that was there in 2016 and 2017 has been a chore because of injuries and because of aging, which is just the natural order of things. Having Jordan Poole come in here and play like this, that gives you time for Jonathan Kuminga to have 3, 4, 5 years to get better, for James Wiseman to have 3, 4, 5 years to get better, and you not to have to panic trade them in pursuit of instantaneous talent. So if you're a Warriors fan, the Jordan Poole thing just has to be so incredibly exciting for you. Let's get into the game a little bit, though. This was an interesting game. You know, Memphis, for as much as I've criticized them for not coming out serious a lot in this playoff run, they came out dead serious tonight. That was what was so strange about them getting blown out the way they did. Early on in the game, their dribble contain was fantastic. They were defending really well on the perimeter, and Ja Morant just went right back to what he did at the end of game 2. He was just getting into the lane and making easy kickouts to guys, and they were getting great shots every time. They jump out to an 18-8 lead. Golden State had 8 turnovers in the first quarter. That was part of that. You know, Golden State through this entire era, there's been one consistent flaw. It's they don't take care of the basketball. And a team like Memphis that runs really well, they're going to put you behind the 8 ball there. So Memphis jumps out to a big lead. I have a personal theory. A lot of people disagree with me about this, but I believe that it's actually better to get off to a slow start than it is to get off to a fantastic start, because I'm a big believer in, like, you have to really lock in. And when you really lock in, it's hard to get out of that zone. But when you get out of it, it's hard to get back into it. And so a lot of times getting punched in the mouth is exactly what you need to lock in. And then the rest of the game, you're so dead-eye focused. Whereas so many times you see something like that, like you saw from Memphis. They come out, and for like 6 minutes, they are locked in. But then they get a big lead, they let their foot off the gas, and now they're getting punched in the mouth. And that was the dynamic that took place in that first quarter. But again, it was Ja Morant. You know, we have to stay a little bit positive on Memphis here. Ja Morant continues to be completely unguardable. There's absolutely nothing they can do with him. They can't even keep him from hanging on the rim. He's just getting by people and dunking on everybody. He's so good at, like, you can't help out of the corners because he's just so reflexive with his passes to those corners. That dude is a flat-out star. I said on the show a while back during the regular season that I thought Ja Morant was better than Derrick Rose, was better than Russell Westbrook. You know, like, he's better than Donovan Mitchell, better than all of these guys that came up that were your typical super freak athletic point guards. He's better than all of those guys. He's already a better shooter than any of those guys. He's flat out a superstar. But their biggest shortcoming right now is they don't have any offensive creation outside of him. If he's not creating something, nobody else on Memphis can. At the end of the third quarter, Memphis was down by 21 points. Memphis didn't have a single player at that point in the game, other than Ja, that either had more than 10 points or more than 3 assists. So they didn't have anybody else on the team that they could lean on to create. I know Desmond Bane is dealing with a back issue right now, And that kind of stuff is really hard to gauge how much it's limiting a player. But even when Desmond Bane was at his peak of health, he never was a great shot creator. He always was feeding off of attention dedicated to other people. He's more Klay Thompson than he is CJ McCollum, as I always say on the show. Jaren Jackson Jr. has potential to attack mismatches, but he's so young and he's so undisciplined right now that he just doesn't understand how to read defenses well enough to really weaponize that the way you need to. He's kind of a bull in a china shop when he's attacking those mismatches. So Ja is kind of stuck on an island trying to create everything. And that's going to be the big thing that Memphis is going to have to address in this offseason if they do lose, is find somebody else that can consistently basically play the point forward role for them and start at the top of the key and try to help make decisions for people. But, for as much as I can complain about Memphis's offense, it was their defense that cost them this game, specifically dribble contain. We talked about this in the Minnesota series. Minnesota was one of the best teams in the league at keeping guys in front on the perimeter. I've talked a lot on this show about how, back in the day, dribble contain was nowhere near as important, because you had all these big guys around the basket. It had more to do with your rim protector, your help side defense, than your ability to keep people in front off of the drive. I think, ironically, the 2020 Lakers won playing a vintage style. They won having JaVale McGee under the basket with Anthony Davis. They won with Dwight Howard and Anthony Davis. Even when they went small, it was Anthony Davis and LeBron on that back line. Danny Green was not super quick with his feet, wasn't great at keeping people in front. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was okay, not great. Alex Caruso was good at it, but they had a lot of guys that gave up line drives. They were just really good at funneling you into their help. But as the league has evolved, now almost every team in the league is playing 4 or 5 guys that can all pass, dribble, and shoot. Look at this Warriors lineup. When you have Steph Curry on the floor with Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and Jordan Poole, with, let's just say it's Draymond, those 4 guys can all pass, dribble, and shoot really well. And then Draymond can pass and dribble really well. So if you get into a system where guys are getting beat off the dribble, it's just one thing after another. Your defense is just all over the place. You can't hope to recover at that point. So at this point in the league, it's never been more important than it is right now to have guys that can sit in a defensive stance and at least make it hard for people to beat you off the dribble. There's a huge difference between Jordan Poole dusting somebody at the perimeter and having a full head of steam towards the rim, and Jordan Poole having to do 2 or 3 moves and then a counter move because the dude slid once and he had to make a counter move, and now he's spinning into the lane. Now he doesn't have a head of steam. That gives much better opportunity for guys to help and recover off of that. No one's saying you can never give up a drive, but you have to occasionally make it difficult to get a foot in the paint. It can't be easy all the time. And what you've seen tonight, and this is Ja Morant's biggest weakness right now, and it's the biggest thing that's going to hold him back as his career develops. He's going to have to really, really adopt this side of the basketball. He's got the athleticism for it, but you have to contain. Ja Morant is offering absolutely no resistance on the perimeter. And again, Memphis, their defensive structure is kind of vintage. They used to play 2 bigs all the time, but even when they don't, let's say Jaren Jackson's down there or Brandon Clark is down there, it's kind of like Desmond Bane's not a great dribble contain guy. Tyus Jones is not a great dribble contain guy. DeAnthony Melton's okay, not great. Ja Morant's not a great dribble contain guy. Kyle Anderson is slow-footed. They have a lot of guys that are great athletes, but in like a big athletic wing kind of way, not like a quick laterally keep people in front of you kind of way. And that put them behind the 8 ball nonstop in this game, especially against a Golden State team. The way that they play with their ball movement, it's especially difficult because of the predicaments that they put you in because of how threatening their players are off the ball. It's not like Golden State's job guarding Ja Morant is different. It's like they just have to deal with this one guy that keeps coming at them from the same spot on the floor, top of the key, dribble drive. We had to figure out how to contain that. We had to figure out how to help and recover off of that. The Steph, Klay, Jordan Poole thing, everyone's in a different spot of the floor each time down the floor. Everything looks different. Each possession is unique. It puts an extra tax on your brain and your ability to stay focused and pay attention during that time. I thought another huge element in this game was Golden State's shooting regression. They shot like absolute shit in game 2. They were Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson combined to go 7 for 36 from 3 in game 2. And on the tape, when I watched the tape, great looks. A lot of really good looks. There's some tough ones in there. but a lot of really good looks. Again, when you see shooting percentages, it always helps to go back and look at the tape and just look at the quality of the shots. Was it one of those nights, or was a team defending you really well? Memphis was giving up a lot of really good shots to great shooters, especially in that second half, and Golden State just wasn't making them. Well, tonight, Wiggins, Poole, Steph, and Klay went 11 for 21 from three. That's great positive regression. Klay Thompson looked fantastic tonight. Specifically with these types of injuries, I talk a lot on this show about rhythm. And I appreciated that Draymond Green on his last episode specifically mentioned this because, again, those guys, I played at the college level, but these guys are pros. They have a lot more credibility than I do. To hear them say it, it carries more weight. But this is why I say that so often. Like, you have to account for the fact that getting rhythm as a basketball player takes time, not just within the game, but also within a long span. Coming back from that many injuries, being away from the game for as long as Klay has been, he was never, even if he feels fantastic, even if you told me his body was more athletic than it was pre-injury, it takes a long time to dial it in. Think about what jump shooting is. Like, again, if I take a three, I'm 6'6", I have a 6'10" wingspan, so there's a lot of moving parts, right? Long arms that, like, one slight millimeter mistake in alignment can mean a foot at the end of the shot. And if I'm taking shots from 24, 25 feet, like, it is an exact science getting the ball to go through the rim often. And if you are off by just the slightest bit, it can take a long time to really dial in those details. And so for Klay, especially as a Warriors fan, you got to bear with him through some of that. You got to be willing to understand that he's working through something. I remember when I broke my foot between my first and second year playing in college, like, I played horrible in non-conference play, even though my body was back. It was just that all of that timing stuff was off. All of that rhythm stuff was off. Then I got into conference play, snapped into gear, and made the all-conference team. But, like, if you looked at my numbers and the way I played in the first half of the season, I was absolutely horrific because I was coming back from an injury, and it just takes time to get that stuff back. So seeing Klay look like himself again, and, one of the big indicators with Klay is audacity. Him and Steph Curry, it's always been about the shots that they're willing to take. That's a great sign of where they're at mentally. And there was a stretch there in that third quarter where you could just tell Klay looked confident again. There was a play where he caught the ball in the right corner. He knew exactly what was going to happen. He's like, I'm going to pump fake. This dude's going to go flying by me. I'm going to get a look. And he actually missed it. But it was like, you could just tell, like, in his head, he was processing things at the right speed finally. Later in the corner, or earlier in the quarter, he made a one-legged running three going into the lane. And it, like, popped through the net. Like, it was dead on. There was no chance he was missing it. So seeing Klay get a little bit back, that's, again, we talked about the influx of talent with Jordan Poole. That's kind of like another influx of talent. Having Klay Thompson regain some of his form. And obviously, defense is another side of that. He'll have to get a little bit better. But it's good. It's good to see that Klay looks good. Looking forward in this series, game threes are tough because I almost always favor the home team in game three. It's their first home game of this series. The teams are already somewhat familiar with each other, so no one's getting surprised, right? And generally speaking, the home team playing in game three is at a motivation advantage, unless they happen to steal both games on the road. But, like, if you're looking at Golden State, they lost game two, should have won, blew an opportunity. They lost game two, right? And so this was a great opportunity for them to come into their home floor and regain control of the series. You knew they had a motivational advantage. Same thing was going on with the Bucks. They got absolutely destroyed in game two. I know there was, like, kind of like a second half where things got a little bit more interesting, but they were down 65-40. 65-40. So they were going to come out on their home floor and want to take care of business. I always call this the buzzsaw game. It's one of my favorite games to bet. And yes, I bet on the two home teams today. But, like, this is one of my favorite games to bet because this is the one game in the series where I think home court plays the biggest role. Game three, regardless of what's going on, unless the home team's up 2-0 already. Game four is going to be a different challenge. Memphis is going to go look at the film, and they're going to see immediately where all their missed opportunities were, particularly on the defensive end of the floor, particularly with dribble drive contain. They're going to come into game four with a whole other level of focus. Now they will be the desperate team. There's always, like, a little bit of a flat feeling in game four when, like, the home crowd always has a little bit less of an impact in that second game, right? So this is good. It's not over. I picked Golden State for a reason. I think they're the better, smarter team. And I think they have more creation. I always look at half court, like how well can a team succeed within the half court? And I always trusted Golden State more in those moments. But the series is not over. I told you guys it's so important for Golden State to try to end this series quickly because of the way that Memphis can physically wear you down over the course of a series, crashing the offensive glass and stuff like that. By the way, weird side plot of this series, Golden State has been amazing on the glass. Coming into this series, we all thought Memphis was going to destroy them down there, and they've been great. Special credit, Gary Payton II before he got hurt, and then also Andrew Wiggins and Otto Porter. Otto Porter Jr., again, and this is part of another thing with the way the game has changed. It used to be that the average shot distance was so much closer to the rim that there were fewer longer rebounds. So what became so important was big guys that could rebound, right? In the modern NBA, with how many long distance shots there are, shots are coming flying off the rim all over the floor. So guard rebounding, wing rebounding is more important now than it's ever been in the history of the league. Having a guy like Otto Porter Jr., who's just got like kind of a heat-seeking missile for the basketball, is a great asset, especially at his size. And him and Andrew Wiggins have been fighting and clawing for contested rebounds this entire series, and it's neutralized a significant portion of Memphis's attack. But at the same time, Memphis is going to keep coming. It's like I've been talking about with the Milwaukee-Boston series. Like, it's not about keeping Giannis in front one time or even 5 times. Can you still do it on the 97th time, on the 98th time, when things really start to wear you down? So getting a 3-1 advantage, taking it back to Memphis and closing this series out, that's the best way to prevent any sort of long-term wear and tear that can take place over the course of this series. So Game 4 is a big opportunity. It's going to be a good game. Both of these games are going to be on Monday night. Monday night will be a super, super interesting night. We will absolutely be going live after the final buzzer, the last game that night, and I can't wait because Game 4 in a 2-1 series, that's always the big turning point. Are you going back 3-1 or are you going back 2-2? Huge difference between those two situations. Everything's going to come down to who can sit in a stance and get a stop? Who can keep somebody in front? Who's willing to do that job, specifically with Jordan Poole? Who can create shots other than Ja? One of the things that Memphis has been doing a lot, and they might have to do more, is have Tyus Jones out there more, to have another guy on the floor that can kind of make decisions at a high pick and roll. Especially one of the things that's been working really well for Memphis is Jaren Jackson is shooting the shit out of the basketball. I think he made 3 or 4 more threes tonight. Him being such a threat in screen and pop situations is going to get guys like Tyus Jones downhill. They might have to play him more because they need some more offensive creation. But the flip side of that, that's another small guy on the floor. That's another guy who's not a great defensive player. That's the predicament that Golden State puts you in. I talk about this in last night's show, our last show that we did. Good teams put you in predicaments where you have to make these types of decisions, and Memphis is going to be in that type of position. But yeah, I still pick Golden State. My guess is at this point that they'll win in 6. I will predict that Memphis will win Game 5 and that Golden State will win Game 4. But Golden State should be gunning to try to end this thing in 5 before physicality becomes a problem.